Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to The Outsider's Perspective. My name's Ollie, and on today's episode of COVID Conversations, I would like to talk about my not so good timing. It was only 2 weeks ago that I started talking about the real pandemic, what I feel is the source of human dysfunction and all of the dysfunctional relationships that we're involved in. What I didn't know was that only a few days before I recorded this video, a man by the name of George Floyd had been murdered by a police officer. Since that time, we've seen firsthand the effects of fear. First in the murder of George Floyd, and then in the subsequent protests and riots and demonstrations that transpired after. That undercurrent I spoke about 2 weeks ago, the one that flows beneath even our best of intentions, spilled out into the world, onto our streets, and the result was not pretty. All of these events, I suggest to you, are motivated or triggered by fear. Even the police, dressed up in their protective military gear, lobbing gas grenades and shooting rubber bullets into crowds of peaceful protesters, they too are the victims of fear. I would even go one step further and say that the police officers who were involved in the murder of George Floyd were also the victims of fear. What we fail to recognize is that fear manifests itself in myriad ways, my friends. Many common emotions we experience on a regular basis are actually nothing but reactions to fear. And hatred, I would like to suggest to you today, is one such emotion, a reaction to fear. But don't take my word for it. There's this musician by the name of Daryl Davis who spent decades of his life befriending and conversing with members of the Ku Klux Klan. His mission was very simple: to understand the nature of hatred, its origins, its methods, and maybe if he was lucky, its cure as well. Based on this information alone, you can probably imagine that Mr. Davis has a lot to offer on this topic. A lot of wisdom and valuable insights from his decades spent talking with these people. In addition to that, there's another reason we should pay close attention to what this man has to say. I'm going to show you a clip of him on the Joe Rogan Experience right now, and I'll let you guess at what this reason is.
So the lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. All right? If you do not keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate those things that frighten us. If you don't check that hatred, it in turn will escalate and breed destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. If you want to solve this problem of racism, we need to stop focusing on the symptoms. Don't worry about the fear. Don't worry about the hatred. Those are just symptoms. That's like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. You got to go down to the bone and treat it at its source. The source of all this is ignorance. Ignorance can be cured. The cure for ignorance is called education. So you fix the ignorance, there's nothing to fear, because you fear what you don't know. When you cure the ignorance, you know something. There's nothing to fear. If there's nothing to fear, then there's nothing to hate. If there's nothing to hate, there's nothing to destroy. So we need to focus on the ignorance, and we address it with exposure and education and conversation. We spend way too much time in this country talking about the other person, talking at the other person, talking past the other person. Why not just spend a little bit of time talking with the other person?
Daryl Davis, a black man, engaged hundreds of KKK members in conversation with the goal of answering one simple question: how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Notice he wasn't trying to debate these men. He wasn't trying to convince them of the error of their ways. He simply wanted to understand what motivates their hate, what gives it life. And based on the clip we just watched, I would say that Mr. Davis has achieved the understanding that he sought out. After all these years, I think he's got it pretty much figured out. His formula seems right to me. Ignorance breeds fear. Fear breeds hatred because we hate the things that frighten us. And hatred breeds destruction because we want to destroy those things that we hate. Or, in this case, those people that we hate. Remember the 4 fears I talked about 2 weeks ago when I was saying that fear is the source of our dysfunction and that we're basically all afraid? I talked about fear of lack, fear of pain and suffering, fear of change, and what's the last one? Fear of the unknown. And what's the unknown? It's nothing more than our own ignorance conceptualized. Davis rightfully tells us that the best way to break this chain is by treating the root cause, the ignorance. And note how he suggests we do this. Not by yelling at people, not by talking at people or over people, not by telling people they're racist or wrong or evil or stupid, but by engaging people in genuine two-way conversation.
I'm sitting there listening to this guy tell me that I'm a criminal and I'm lazy and on welfare and my brain is smaller than his. What he was saying was indeed offensive. But here's the difference between me and most other people. I did not take offense to it. And I'll tell you why I did not take offense to it. Why should I be offended by somebody who knows nothing about me? He only met me 10 minutes ago. He sees the color of my skin and has made this assessment. So why should I take offense to somebody who's telling a lie? That's what usually stops a conversation. And then people get into combat.
Yes.
And then it goes nowhere.
I wasn't there to fight him. I was there to learn. That's the attitude he was going into these conversations with, and the results were spectacular. So now, let's use our imagination for a moment. Let's think about someone in our lives that we disagree with on, maybe it's just one topic, maybe it's a bunch of topics, doesn't matter. Just think of a person that you disagree with strongly on at least one topic. Maybe it's your Trump-loving uncle. Maybe it's your SJW best friend. Maybe it's your colleague who's a new age hippie, or your neighbor who's an anti-vaxxer. Now imagine sitting down with this person and having a conversation with them about the things you vehemently disagree about. Imagine what it would be like to have this kind of conversation, not with the intent to disprove their points or the intent to prove yourself right and them wrong, but just to get a better sense of why they believe what they believe, why they feel what they feel, why they think the way they think, what experiences led to this, what, indoctrination did they go through as kids, right? Where did these beliefs come from? And at the same time, by doing this openly and with good faith, you're also opening yourself up to a similar kind of inquiry on their end. And who knows? You may find that these people have some good sense. Maybe some of the things that they believe are actually pretty good. And maybe some of the things that we believe, not so good. And so what happens is you each gain a better understanding of yourselves and each other. It's a mutual benefit. Everybody wins. But for most people, the idea of sitting down with somebody they really disagree with and having that kind of conversation is maybe frustrating. Maybe it's frightening. Maybe people think it's just a waste of time, so they'd never bother to have those types of conversations. But that's exactly the kind of good faith dialogue we need right now to bridge the imaginary gaps between groups of people and individual human beings. This kind of conversation draws people together. It creates a sense of mutual understanding. And yes, it can also lead to radical transformations in one or both parties. Just ask Daryl Davis. He was able to help 200 people leave the Ku Klux Klan. Now remember, that was never his intent. He was just trying to educate himself. He was just trying to gain a better understanding of hatred. But as an accidental byproduct, he was able to help 200 people leave this hate group. So just ponder that for a minute. What we're seeing in the racial tension and the police violence in the US and in Canada right now is nothing more than fear of the unknown. Fear of the mysterious, frightening other. People like myself, people who view race as a construct rather than a reality, people who value character over superficial markers like skin color, sexual orientation, and gender identity. People like myself, we don't understand racism. It doesn't make sense to us. And so many of us grow to hate that which we do not understand. In the past, I've joked about this. I've told people that I'm racist towards racists. Now, of course, that doesn't make any sense because being a racist isn't a race. But then again, being black, being Chinese, being white, these are not races either. There's the human race, of which we are all a part. And yeah, there's a little bit of genetic diversity in there, but that's what makes us so awesome. Imagine if we all behaved the same. Imagine if we all had the same ideas and opinions. That would be a dull, ugly world, my friends. Diversity is beauty, and we're lucky to have so much of it in our human family. But as you can tell, this is my view. And so when I encounter someone who actually does believe that races represent real, hard, fast divisions between groups of human beings, when those people also express hatred and negative opinions about an entire group of people because they believe that they're somehow lesser, I can't understand that. And that's a very dangerous trap. In fact, it's the exact same trap that ensnares racists. Lately, there's been a trend. People like myself, who view racism as something to be done away with, when we encounter racists, we want to censor them. We want to deplatform them. We want to cancel them. And that, I suggest to you, my friends, is a grave mistake. What we need to do is the opposite. We need to let them talk, and we need to listen. Not because we agree with them, of course, but because we need to understand them. We need to understand them. Because if we don't, that will lead to fear. And that fear will turn to hatred. And that leads nowhere good, my friends. What we need to do is overcome these divisions. I know, we're not going to convince everybody. Not everyone's going to be down for this kumbaya, let's have a chat around the campfire approach. But many will. Many will. And we don't need everyone right away to come over and join not our side, but the side. Right? It's not my side, your side. It's the human side. That's my theory anyways. And as usual, I'm happy to hear your opinions on the matter. I'm sure you have many, and I look forward to hearing them in the comments section below.